There was a woman that has been labeled by Guinness World Records as the most prolific female serial killer of all time, even though the number of her victims is still highly debated. She was accused of torturing and killing hundreds of young girls and women with the help of 4 of her servants. Her tale is one of horror, sadistic torture, intrigue, rumors, and dark deeds. This is the haunted tale of the Blood Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Hello to all my fellow creepy little weirdos. My name is Christina, and I will be your tour guide through the realms of the unexplained, the paranormal, and the just plain weird. Welcome to Horror, History, and Hauntings. The year was 1604, and the cold, gray stone walls of Cachtice Castle loomed over the small village below. Perched on the hilltop, the castle was a formidable sight, with its turrets piercing the sky like jagged teeth. Within its walls, Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian noblewoman of great wealth and influence, was at the height of her power. She was a striking figure, tall and commanding, with raven black hair that flowed down her back and eyes as cold and dark as winter's night. Elizabeth Bathory was born on August 7th, 1560, to one of the most powerful families in Hungary. Bathory was a child suffering from an illness referred to as the falling sickness, which we would now recognize as epilepsy, and she suffered from multiple seizures. The common treatment at the time was to take the blood of someone that was healthy and rub it onto the lips of the sick person during a seizure. Or when they were coming out of an episode, they would have them ingest a mix of a healthy person's blood and a ground up piece of human skull. Some would later speculate that this is when her taste for blood could have begun. From a young age, she exhibited a fierce intelligence and an insatiable curiosity, qualities that would serve her well in a world that was dominated by men. She married Ferenc Nunasadi, who was a warrior known as the Black Knight of Hungary, and together they wielded significant power. When Ferenc was away fighting the Ottoman Turks, Elizabeth managed their vast estate, overseeing the work of hundreds of servants. Some say there were whispers about Elizabeth, even in those early days. Rumors circulated among the peasants that she had dabbled in dark arts and had a volatile temper. She was known to punish her servants with a cruel and sadistic streak, often resorting to severe beatings for the slightest infraction. As time went on, the whispers grew louder. After the death of her husband in 1604, Elizabeth's behavior supposedly became even more erratic. With no one to temper her cruelty, she began to indulge in her darkest desires. The villagers spoke of screams echoing through the night from the castle, and young girls disappearing without a trace. Elizabeth's obsession with youth and beauty became more pronounced. It was said that she believed the blood of the young virgins could keep her skin youthful and her beauty eternal. Under the guise of hiring them as maids or servants, she lured the young peasant girls to her castle, never to be seen again. She was also accused of not only killing maids or servants, but also the daughters of the lesser gentry. These girls were sent to Bathory and entrusted by their family to attend her gymnasium, which is just a really fancy name for a school to teach the girls about courtly etiquette. During the trial, the families would name relatives who supposedly suffered and died in Bathory's care, claiming that they saw traces of torture on their loved one's body before having them buried. Those who claimed to have escaped Bathory told horrific tales. They spoke of being stripped naked and beaten, of having their flesh pierced with needles, and their faces burned with hot irons. Some even claimed that Elizabeth would bite chunks of flesh from their bodies, her face twisted in a gruesome mask of pleasure as she tasted their blood. The tales grew darker and more fantastical with each retelling, painting a picture of a woman consumed by madness, the Blood Countess, It wasn't long after these stories of Bathory's activities drew the attention of the Hungarian authorities. King Matthias II, hearing these rumors, sent his highest-ranking officer, Georgi Thurzo, to investigate in December of 1610. Thurzo and his men arrived unannounced at the Cachtice castle. What they found supposedly confirmed their worst fears. In the castle's dark, damp dungeons, they said they discovered the bodies of young girls, some still alive but barely clinging to life. Their bodies were covered in bruises and cuts. The dead were mutilated beyond recognition and their bodies drained of blood. Thurzo himself testified in the trial that he caught Elizabeth in the act of torturing a young girl. Her face was splattered with blood and her eyes were wild with manic gleam. The Blood Countess was arrested and brought to trial. The evidence against her was overwhelming, according to them, with over 3,000 witnesses testifying to her crimes. They spoke of a room in the castle known as the Chamber of Torture. It was filled with instruments of unimaginable cruelty. They described how Elizabeth and her accomplices would lure the girls to the castle, where they would be beaten, cut, and drained of their blood. Some witnesses even claimed that Bathory bathed in the blood of virgins, believing it would keep her young forever. Elizabeth Bathory was found guilty of 80 counts of murder, though the actual number was believed to be much, much higher, possibly in the hundreds. Because of her noble status, she was not executed, but instead was sentenced to life imprisonment. She was confined to her castle. For 4 years, she languished in solitude, slowly succumbing to the madness and despair. On August 21st, 1614, Elizabeth Bathory was found dead in her cell. She was buried in the village cemetery at first, but her body was later moved, as the villagers did not want the notorious countess resting among them. No one really knows where the countess's body was finally interred, only adding to the mystery of this story. Now, most of what is told in the story is based on the testimony during her trial and rumors that have been told and retold. So unfortunately, we will never really know the truth from the fiction. But I would not be doing my due diligence if I didn't also explain a couple of things about the investigation and the trial so you can draw your own conclusions. The first thing is that the man that did the investigation, remember him, Georgi Thurzo? He could have had his own motives in implicating Elizabeth Bathory in such an awful public way. Before Bathory's husband passed away, he had entrusted his children and his future widow to Thurzo himself. So he could have wanted to get Bathory out of the way so he could seize control of her land and wealth, because at the time, female rulers were often looked down upon and they were forced to marry or were killed, and maybe in this case using scandals to force into giving up their power. Also, the way that they often interviewed witnesses at the time was much different and much less credible than today. There was nothing in place to protect a victim from being forced to talk or paid off to testify in a certain way. It is also known that at least 3 of the 4 people accused of helping Bathory confessed while being viciously tortured. 2 of them had their fingers torn out with a pair of red-hot pincers, and then they were burned alive screaming. 1 somehow was able to escape capture at first, but then was apprehended. They were immediately burned alive. The last one actually wasn't executed like the other 3. They were given a linear sentence of a life sentence because of, 1, they were very young, and that the evidence that they had gathered during the investigation showed that the girl had been mistreated and abused by the other women. I would also have you make note that most of the proof they found against Bathory and the 4 servants were based on rumors, and that there were no documents to prove any complaints or issues with the Countess or her household before she was accused and arrested, which was very rare for the time. People usually made a letter of complaint for anything that made them feel harmed, suspected harm, or any wrongdoing of any kind. So we really have no substantial evidence of guilt. It was all verbal testimony with no physical evidence. For example, there was a claim made by a servant girl. Her name was Susanna. Susanna claimed that she had seen some sort of figure in one of Bathory's private books that were kept by her court official that cited that there were 650 victims that died at the hands of Bathory and her crew. But when they questioned the court official that was responsible for these books, it was never mentioned again, and the book was never revealed. So, regardless of what you believe, Elizabeth Bathory's story has become the stuff of legend, a tale of cruelty and vanity, power and madness. She is remembered as one of history's most prolific female serial killers, a woman whose insatiable thirst for blood and beauty led her down a path of unimaginable horror. Whether all the tales told about her are true or not, the legend of the Blood Countess lives on. A dark, chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It would really mean the world to me. You might also like this video about how Beauty and the Beast was inspired by actual real people. And spoiler, it doesn't end with happily ever after. Or you might enjoy this playlist about other haunting stories on my channel. And as always, thank you for watching, good night, and sweet dreams. Bye-bye.